While we're taking celebrity photos, because we have a great team up here, I'm going to begin the introductions so that way you are well informed of the great panel that we have up here. So please welcome Rear Admiral Mark Melson, U.S. Navy retired, a senior defense leader and seasoned operator across every region where the U.S. and Allied naval forces operate. A former commander of Task Force 73 and Logistics Group Western Pacific, Admiral Melson brings deep expertise in global logistics, Indo-Pacific strategy, and amphibious operations. He's commanded squadrons and ships, including the USS Makin Island, served in the as a naval aide to the Vice President, and is a graduate of both MIT's National Security Fellowship and the Eisenhower School. He now lends his insight to critical conversation on littoral mobility, where we're honored to have him as our subject matter expert here with the panelists such as Captain Charles B. Eckhart, the commanding officer of the Naval Expeditionary Warfighting Development Center, where he leads training doctrine and operational readiness for the Navy Expeditionary Combat Force. Commissioned in 1997 and a qualified explosive ordnance disposal officer, Captain Eckhart has commanded EOD and riverine units in multiple combat theaters, including Iraq and the broader Middle East. He has also held key leadership roles at U.S. Northern Command, Fleet Forces Command, and NECC. He holds degrees from the University of San Diego and Air Command and Staff College. We also have the retired Lieutenant Colonel Audry Wu, assistant professor at U.S. Army Command and General Staff College, and demonstrated master logistician with over 2 decades of experience in global mobility and operations. She has led transportation and logistics teams across NATO, Turkey, the Indo-Pacific, and multiple U.S. commands. Her roles have included Director of Transportation and Operations at NATO and in Naples, and Executive Director at Fort Leavenworth. We also have retired Colonel John Sattely, Executive Director for Contested Logistics at ManTech, a former strategic planner at U.S. Central Command. Colonel Sattely brings decades of operational logistics experience, including theater-level sustainment in high-threat environments. At ManTech, he leads efforts to modernize logistic architectures for peer conflict, shaping how we sustain forces across time, distance, and denied domains. And last but not least, we have Lieutenant Colonel Timothy Smith. He's the Science and Technology Logistics Combat Element Branch Head at the Marine Corps Warfighting Laboratory. He leads experimentation on cutting-edge maritime sustainment solutions, most notably the Stern Landing Vessel and autonomous littoral connector programs tested during Project Convergence exercises to inform future force design. His work advances real-world mobility and sustainment capabilities at the lowest tactical levels of conflict. And as you could see, that is a lot of accomplishments and years and talent at the table. So please get out your notes. You remember how to do that. Turn over your blank pieces of paper, write down a whole lot, and enjoy this next panel. Give them a round of applause.
Thanks, Brandon. Can everybody hear me okay? So I appreciate that intro. It's great to be here. I want to thank the whole AMCL team, Kirk, Rob, Josh, Greg, everybody on the team. This has been a fantastic event, and I think will continue to be. And it's critically important here for us to kind of have these continued conversations. I think we're between us and lunch, but we're going to be pretty tight here. We're going to talk about some tactical and operational things, which is a comfort zone for all of us. But we won't forget some of these strategic elements. I also want to thank CNU and Dr. Bush for the allowing us to be here and take part in this. It's a great scene. I'm actually going to be here a week from now personally launching the second kid into college. And so this is actually giving me a little bit of an opportunity to do some IPB. So in the interest of trying to get cool dad points with my teenager, my essay is going to be crazy good in a way that it wouldn't normally be. So it's great. It's great to be here. So you might be thinking, what's a Navy P3 guy doing moderating a littoral mobility panel that's closing the next, the last 200 miles. And we'll have that debate about what's the right mileage when we kind of talk about the last tactical mile. Is it 1,000? Is it 200? What is it? But we'll kind of try and explore that a little bit. As Brandon said, I had Makin Island back in 2016, 17. So hopefully that gives me a little bit of street cred. But for most of my career, I really didn't touch a war game, and I really didn't think about logistics other than from the consumption perspective. But so in 2020, I was fortunate enough to make flag, went to the J7 as we were launching JWC 1.0. And so as that was sort of getting out of the building and we were wargaming that, did a good 8 or 10 war games and TTXs as we were trying to get that thing out the door. Then I was selected to go be CTF 73 Comlog Westpac in Singapore, which is the Navy's sort of premier forward deployed logistics staff in support of PAC Fleet and 7th Fleet operations. And so I learned a great deal in those 4 years, my last 4 years of service, which was really important. I thought the wargaming panel, by the way, yesterday was exceptional. I did about 10 or 12 contested logistics war games during my time in command. I think that is commander's business because we learned things that came directly back to our watch floors. But you have to have the operational influence back into those war games to be able to start separating wheat from chaff, saying, hey, this is the good, this is the bad in this analytic activity. And so I thought that panel yesterday was great. And we have to build the bench. You have to open up the hood. You have to get industry in there. You have to get people like MSc masters in there. So we have to build that bench so that they understand the breadth of the analytic activity. So these 4 years, I found religion. I'm here with you. I'm a loggy now. It's like a ship CEO that once you see running rust, you can't unsee it. I no longer can unsee logistics. My family makes fun of me all the time about it, but it is reality. And I'm, quite frankly, the last couple of years in service were frustrated that the 4 conversations continued to be at the back of the brief or the back at the op board instead of the front. And I think it's master of the obvious statement to say that sustainment, mobility, logistics is absolutely going to dictate the terms of our operations. It's not trying to cram it in. It's going to dictate those terms. And so I think it's important and hopefully will help to fix it here. So where are we today? I'll just kind of talk about a little bit of my experience and what was happening in the Western Pacific when we kind of talk about where we're at in littoral mobility. As I said yesterday, the panels that we ended yesterday and begun today at the strategic level, which I thought was great, but we'll get a little bit tactical and operational here, I hope, through the course of this conversation. But at the same time, understanding that some of those strategic aspects we have to we have to take into consideration. We are experimenting a lot with everything that is expeditionary reload and rearm. Most people in the Pentagon do not understand where we are at on expeditionary reload and rearm. I got Chuck here who's going to help us work through some of that, but we're in baby steps. We're still trying to figure out where to reload in the Navy standard missiles on US bases using certified cranes without hurting ourselves. We're talking about multiple strike groups in the theater, massive capacity of reload, and we're still in baby steps. And so I caution everybody to think about expeditionary reload. And again, that's across the joint force. We'll talk about the challenges we have in the other services as well. Experimenting with EPFs and mobility. So I tried to pull off an experiment where I wanted to take an EPF, I wanted to send it to Luzon, and I wanted to put some MDTF or MLR stuff on it and truck it on down to Mindanao, offload it, just to see how hard that is. Couldn't get it done in 2 years of being in command there. So we talk about evolutions like that happening on a grand scale in the fight. We're still in baby steps of experimentation. So what does a future vignette look like where we do start to cook with gas a little bit? This isn't a high-end example, but take the F-35. So let's say you've got a jet on Tripoli that is down and you need an F-135 module to replace that engine. You take a Navy CMV-22 off the George Washington, you fly it over to the Royal Navy Prince of Wales, who's on deployment in the Western Pacific today. You take one of those engine modules, you fly it back to Tripoli, you make an upjet, 5th gen capability that goes and partners with JASDAF on a DCA mission defending the Southwest Islands in conflict or crisis. That's PhD level sustainment, integrated work. I think we can see that future and what it looks like, but we need more of those reps. It's obviously a joint coalition game. We kind of talked about that. Hopefully we have the panel that represents that here. My battle buddy in time in command with 3rd MLG, Adam Chalkley, we worked all the time together to try and make sure that before we were asking Mother May I for more resources, that we had our own backyard in shape. And so we did a lot of work with that, partnered with the Army extensively with their TSEs, with their posture in the Indo-Pacific. I would say a delta that we still suffer is we've not partnered with the Air Force as much as we should. I had a conversation with PACAF and he said, hey, I totally agree with you that we need to get better. But But the Indo-PACOM commander on a given day may say that the number one sustainment requirement is an F-35A squadron on a remote island. And everybody in this room is going to have to say, okay, what does that look like? How do we support that operation? So this is intra-theater distribution. That's where we're going to try and focus most of the conversation. We know that we don't have enough air and surface lift. That's been kind of pounded into our head. But General Skolinka said yesterday that mobility equals agility, and I think that is true. Or another way is shoot, move, and communicate. And so we're going to have to shoot, move, and communicate the joint force. To quote Donald Rumsfeld, you go to the war with the army that you have. And so the enemy decides that we're going to have this fight in 18 months. We're going to have to take whatever resources we have and figure out a way to do that. And all those little pesky enablers that make things go boom are going to be critically important. Chuck will talk about reload teams. We don't have enough OHE or GSC and OSE. Where are those things positioned today, 6 months from now, a year from now, that potentially enable victory? We don't have enough C-130s. We don't have enough EPFs. We don't have enough fleet oilers. Pre-post ships are in the wrong position. Got it. What we hope today is to introduce a little bit of progress. And I said, we talked to the panel members, and let's try and find some good news. So where are we in the intra-theater distribution challenges where there are good things that are happening in the services? There are good things happening in industry. There are some good things that are happening conceptually that Tim will talk about that make us a little bit better. So we're going to try and do 3 rounds here. We'll do kind of 1 round focused quickly on the intra-theater positive things that are happening. Second round, we'll kind of talk about the nexus between intra-theater and then what echelon commanders have to understand at the echelon 1, echelon 2, tip, fid, flow, inter-theater challenges. We're going to have to find out where that nexus is and deal with that a little bit. And then maybe we'll get to a lightning round talking about some risk areas and then plenty of conversation with you all. So Chuck, kind of tell us what's happening from the Navy expeditionary warfare. We know that things like expeditionary reload, refuel, resupply are going to be important. What are some of the positive things that you're seeing in your world today?
Yes, thank you, sir. So the expeditionary reload is a great example of stuff that we've been able to iterate much faster due to current events, right? So if you're thinking about Fifth Fleet, Houthis were shooting at our ships, and we had to push logistics forward, right? So up to that point, the expeditionary reload teams were largely conceptual. Navy Mission Command is the entity that's charged with reloading VLS for Crudez ships to be able to do that mission. But they needed improved ports to be able to do that, right? So they had to be improved ports, which means that your logistics aren't at that front edge, right? So using some retraining some folks that are under Navy Expeditionary Logistics Command, right? They were crane operators largely, stevedores, being able to move stuff around, giving them some equipment. We started working on this just a few years prior. When I was at NECC, as a matter of fact, and we were missing ordnance handling equipment. We're still short on ordnance handling equipment. There's still a lot of lead time for this stuff. We had to get with program officers for certification of the teams. We had to do sets and reps, and we did a lot of experimentation and stuff early, but it was always peer side, one cell, one training shape, this, that, and the other. But through this and the need, right, that drove rapid innovation within the battlefield, much akin to, war, right? And we were able to validate that capability and be able to do it forward by using cranes that were actually there, right? So host nation cranes working with getting a contract in there so we can operate them, and then being able to do that successfully. And then most recently, we were able to do it in a protected harbor, right? As we're moving this capability from, forward edge of, terra firma, we're now pushing forward to being able to do that into protected harbors and the like, and ultimately we'd like to be able to do that underway. So as we're taking these steps, we're doing this, right? Nothing breeds innovation like need, and that's really what we saw here, and we've been able to capitalize that most recently.
No, that's great, Chuck, and I would encourage everybody to watch, Admiral Paparo's words, former Fifth Fleet commander, obviously now Indo-PACOM commander, what we're learning in Fifth Fleet and CEMCOM. Some translate. I think Chuck talked about that. Some things don't, and Admiral Paparo will kind of talk about the difference in scale and scope of the theater, difference in partners. Australia has significantly different OSHA type requirements than some of our friends in the Middle East. And so some of those things are going to have to be different, when we talk about that partnering, but those are great examples. Audrey, you're our Army representative. Yes. An absolute amazing record in academia, but then also significant in-theater experience at the tactical and operational level. So how are we doing as far as Navy, Marine Corps, Army, intra-theater distribution integration?
Sure. I commanded the boat unit out in Hawaii, so I had the joint high-speed vessel during my tenure, as well as the logistics support vessel. So as a transporter, a unique command. So I've been able to see the evolution of Army watercraft as well as the interoperability. I think we've been progressing significantly over the years. During my tenure, I've had 11 years of Indo-PACOM experience. It's gotten a lot better, and there's always room for improvement. So we have a lot more interoperability with the Navy, the Marine Corps, as well as the Army. And the Army does bring things to the fight, right? So who's been to Hawaii? How many people have, okay. Right, so I'm probably preaching to the choir here that most of your equipment has probably been brought to the Big Island for training to PTA by Army. Our LSVs have brought you to the Big Island. So those are enablers as well. And we actually positioned one over in Japan. So there's other initiatives that maybe you're not aware of, that we have LCUs as well for Pulse W. That was an initiative I came up with back in 2012, 2013, to utilize our watercraft over in Indo-PACOM, and that was a precursor to Pacific Pathways, which I designed to bring things forward to basically shorten the tyranny of distance. So right now we've contracted with Vigor Marine Group for the MSV Light, which will replace our aging Mike boats, LCM8s. And so those prototypes are still under sea trials, but we have that. And another good news story for the Army, and maybe this is a good idea for other services, is on the Army Transformation Initiative. We have, a lot of times you will have a sustainment issue where you're waiting for higher levels of maintenance, and you're waiting for a contractor. Not saying anything bad about contractors, by the way. However, that could be a lag time in which you're trying to mitigate. So the Army has gone forward with their contracting and procurement initiative for the right to repair. So that is for some of our equipment for the operator level to basically have that ability, so that shortens the timeline for maintenance. So those are two of our good news stories for the Army.
No, thanks, Audrey. And what I learned in the Western Pacific is, whether you agree with it or not, the U.S. Army is going to be fundamental. It does in many respects set the theater, quote unquote, and a Navy or Air Force or Marine Corps operator may or may not like that, but that is the condition that we find ourselves in. And so I was trying to watch and follow the notes from Talisman Sabre 25 pretty close that just happened. From the pre-po position we kind of talked about, I think every service is in the mood of, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to do an operational rehearsal. Might not be an O-plan rehearsal, but Tal Sabre 25 had significant capacity, and I'm going to leave stuff there. What everybody in this room understands is, how do you maintain the currency then of all that equipment, from the test set that Dasdy Kelleher was talking about all the way to some of the high-end stuff. But we're going to have to, we'll talk a little bit more about the role of TSCs and the integration there, but I think Audrey's right around. John, you're our industry rep, and so I think there's lots of good things happening where industry in the short term, because of what DoD can't do, is going to have to come to the table. So, what are you seeing across industry and your portfolio that gives us a little bit of hope on partnership with industry?
Yes, sir. I appreciate the question. So I'm going to throw a term out here that's not doctrinal, but I think when you hear it, you're going to be like, that actually makes a lot of sense. Is we look at it as industrial prep of the environment. Now imagine, as military planners, you guys sat there and you put your McCoo overlays down to see where all your basing, your forces are at. Now, what if private industry did the same thing and said, well, here's where we're at. And some of you guys represent that out there in places like Indio-PACOM and some in other locations. But yesterday someone mentioned Maersk, for example. I'm just throwing out an example. If you look at Maersk, where all their capacity lies in terms of warehousing, storage, shipping, there's a lot of options there that can be leveraged and opened up. I think that's something that, commercial solutions do provide an outlet or a remedy, certainly as a bridging solution in the near term to fill in capability gaps and capacities. I think, really the bottom line is, and it goes back to something that started off with General Skolinka when he said agility is, and I tell this to commanders when I go out there, because we've been on a road show for the last 20 months, hitting components and commands out in the Pacific, talking to them, and I want to be able to provide them as many options as possible. That's agility. And you guys represent some of that agility. Some of you guys provide options that give them, okay, well, we can't do this, but where can they fill in some of those gaps? You mentioned Talisman Sabre. Another exercise we got a chance to observe as an industry is PAC Sentry. And I'll tell you, I've never had a hand cramp before, but I added that one exercise because I was writing the entire time because the whole exercise was just them saying what they could not do. And that was across the joint force. I mean, it was hosted by the Navy, but it was just saying, look, we can't do this, and we need more mobility, we need more capacity, we need more capability across all functions of logistics. Because, it's a maritime fight. It's a big area of the Indo-PACOM theater. It's all non-contiguous, a lot of islands, a lot of places they want to be at. And some of those options, I think in the minds of me, back in my day when I was in uniform, I'd look at it and go, I don't know if industry can go to these places like north of Luzon or Ryoka or some of these islands off the Ryoka Arc. You'd be surprised. I mean, they're doing it today. And some of y'all that have been out there are out there. I know Leo Spader just came out of there. You look at a map and you go, okay, look, there's an anchor right there by the coastal city. That's a good port. We'll just offload our TUs there. Oh, no, it's not going to work like that at all. Most times you're going to look at a very small, medium-sized shipping platform. You're going to be dealing in break bulk. You're not going to be unloading ISO containers or TUs. And so we just have to kind of shift to understand some of the differences. But, I mean, again, commercial industry can do that if they understand what you want. And, in fact, the Navy's probably been the best because they just recently last night sent me a requirement saying, hey, look, we don't want to tell you what ship we need. Just here's all the things we want to do with that cargo. Perfect. Let us work that for you, and I'll come back to you with a solution. So, again, there are a lot of commercial solutions out there. Industry, people always make the narrative, we can't do it without industry. We'll give industry a chance to take a look at that and take it on, because you'd be surprised the amount of options and agility they can give you in the distribution network.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think, my time on the Joint Staff, I think there was a clear recognition that you were going to have to read industry in and let them look under the hood at the basement level of JWC. And so I think that's only increasing because we know that there's just near-term capacity that they're going to introduce. Okay, so we've got Tim, the academic, at the end of the table. He brought books, so he significantly got street cred. So I'm going to ask you two questions, Tim. We'll start round two with you. So it's great to have you here. Question one, kind of talking about intra-theater. Talk about the organic craft dilemma of the Marine Corps. Is there one question? And then, if you can, talk about the joint force is the stand-in force, right? And there was a great article written by a Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel in Proceedings this month talking about one MLR does not equal the stand-in force. An MLR is part of the stand-in force, but the stand-in force is likely very joint and then needs to shoot, move, and communicate in a joint fashion. So Tim, question one, kind of talk to us about the thought that's going into providing depth and creativity for intra-theater distribution for the Marine Corps. And then perhaps that second question to start us on the nexus to inter-theater, have we lost our operational or institutional depth in understanding some of these challenges?
So I'll start with maybe a surprise to Marines in the room not associated with Headquarters Marine Corps. We're probably over $100 million in the last 3 years invested in Marine Corps watercraft. And I'll kind of specify that a little bit more. Just recently, right now, as John just talked about, partnering with private industry. So the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab actually did that. We converted an OSV, offshore support vessel, from private industry will fully say that what we did was not what is fully right, but it was something, right, to at least further the conversation. So we did that. We moved very quickly on that. We worked through MSC, right, as the normal way to charter a vessel. Got that into Indo-PACOM, participated in a couple things. I think we learned a lot about things that we already know. We just need to open the books again and reread the stuff that we've put in the doctrine and other lessons learned and forgotten about from the past, and then dust that kind of stuff off with, oh, that actually matters. John just talked about, again, partnering with industry. So the lab is working through ManTech, through one of their subsidiaries, to build a vessel overseas in Indonesia that we will be doing a foreign comparative test partnered with the Australians on for the next 3 years. That will be very interesting, and if you all heard the comments from my contractor in here, Rich, wherever you're hiding over there, that's his baby right now. Significant investment in dollars for that, right? So that's what we're doing. Both Pat and or Mr. Kelleher and the DC talked about autonomous low-profile vessels. So yes, it's true. You can go Google it. The Marine Corps actually owns 3 narco submarines. We built those quickly. And I've got the 2MEF guys smiling because they have one right now. We've got one in Indo-PACOM that Lieutenant Colonel Leo Spader used multiple times. So we're kind of thinking through these interesting areas. Are these fully right? No. Are they prototypes? Absolutely. Can we design and build them in 12 months and move very quickly? Sure. It's giving Colonel Angel's old office like a heart attack because we're moving so quick, but it's a good thing. And now it's time for the .MPF side to catch up to see if we're actually really going to do this or not. And multiple times, right, our service has to decide, do we even want to get in the boat game or not? Because there's significant investment to be in the boat game. But if we're not in the boat game, it's kind of hard to do what we think we're going to do because there's not a lot of roads in between the Ryukyus and Kakus and the Philippine archipelago. So those are kind of some of the big things we're doing. Other capability that is coming to a place in the Marine Corps. We're building 2 ancillary surface craft. Those are the keel's getting laid on those later this month down in New Orleans. And those will be delivered in about 12 months. Chasing money for small boats, and when we talk about the enablers, the surf zone, near shore, foreshore area, we're doing some experimentation there as well. A highlight, you all have seen REGENT out there as the sea glider company. We are actually very partnered with them. The cool thing is, for the service in the room, to this point, we've not given any Marine Corps top line money to them, but they've gotten over 10 million via ConAds that have been processed through the lab to them to develop technology. So we're also in that space kind of as well. And we're delivering 2 more narco subs in probably about the next 2 months of 2 new designs. So we're kind of all over the space. I would like to say the fun part of the narco piece is we know that there's challenges with them, but we purposely built and we purposely did enough testing with the Navy's combatant craft folks in Norfolk to get them safe to use, and then we put them immediately into the hands of junior Marines. We didn't waste time kind of doing lots of analysis and other things at like a headquarters level. No, we went immediately to who the user was going to be so that we could rapidly learn. And by doing that, we learned lots of things, and then we iterated onto our second version within 7 months. And that's a redesign or an updated design and then a build. So we're moving very quick, and we're moving with fleet input, no kidding back.
So, hey, Tim, so if I can change that question too. Yep. So as I'm listening to you, how does McWill and CD&I inform Headquarters Marine Corps to get some of those? You could make the argument that if you're going to experiment those, you should not be experimenting with those on this coast, that you need to be getting those out to the Pacific. So what's the conversation with Headquarters Marine Corps to be able to get lift, movement, mobility, or whatever in the inter-theater sense to get it out to where Marines in the Indo-Pacific can experiment with it.
So I think we're going to do a two-parter on that.
Yeah.
So the first was the advantage to get our AOPV out to Okinawa was I put it on our SOV. So there was zero cost to anybody because I was already moving that ship there. That AOPV is now stuck in Okinawa because the service collectively decided not to fund the resolution going forward on 2 additional years. So that craft that's there will stay there into perpetuity and until we sink it, ground it, blow it up, do whatever. The second piece, I think John will probably talk to that a little bit, is with what we're doing with the stern landing vessel STS.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just, it got mentioned a little bit last panel, and he just touched on it again. So the activity is R&D or experimentation, but that wasn't the reason why they were allowed to use the ship. And I want to make that clear because there is a sort of an enormous industry, to include greatly military misunderstanding about Jones Act and Cargo Preference Act. There's a belief that it can't be done to use a contracted or chartering a ship for a foreign flagged, foreign crewed ship. That's actually not true. And I know this because I spent a lot of time with Transcom, MSC, and SDDC, and we actually went and did all the research and got them to sanction the process to how to get that ship. So the reason I mention this is because even the Marines, one of the components was like, yeah, we tried that. I'm like, did you know? Because they basically laid out your justification for using this ship. In this case, the SLV, like I mentioned, some of these places that you've been to where in this case, Marines are operating from, they're not in mature ports with port structures and terminals and cranes. There's just, that's not where they're operating from. That's not where they're doing sea denial type of missions. So how do you get geared from a commercial standpoint? Well, this stern landing vessel can land into a beach. By the way, it looks very similar to a LSM. It's a commercial ship, just not colored gray, but it can deliver on a beach at 1 to 40. I think it's getting ready to go to 1 to 60 gradient, which meets almost 85% of all the beach standards in the Pacific to deliver cargo. So, I mean, again, commercial option, right? I mean, it's a commercial option. If you can't get there from a military standpoint, that's the way to do it. And how do you get the approval? No one in the U.S. is building that right now. So you're going to get approved if you tell them that's what you want. That's your operational requirement, and again, the SCDC will talk you through that.
Yeah, and you said a number, John, there that resonates with me is 85%. We're going to have a point where perfect cannot be the enemy of getting a platform out there where you can start to work with it. So 85%, I don't buy the risk. I'm wearing a suit. I'm not wearing a uniform anymore, but I would venture to say that Admiral Paparo would take a number like 85% in this example and probably say, hell yeah. So Audrey, kind of help us understand when we kind of talk about inter-theater distribution, getting stuff all the way across the Pacific. I've worked a lot with the TSEs and kind of trying to understand the relationship between the echelon commanders in theater and then things like 8th TSE combining with the Indo-PACOM PD doc, combining with the 8th TSC, kind of help us understand that more a little bit, or what the 8th TSC is doing in coordination with the other services.
So 8th TSC, by service responsibility, has the responsibility to set the theater. For Army, we have that responsibility for providing that sustainment for all services. So it's understanding those requirements and trying to get those requirements and then passing those along and making sure that they're in the right place, right time. I was a mobility director, so it was trying to make sure that you as the tactical element have that in a timely fashion. So if that means we're bringing it to and pre-pooling that to a specific location, so it shortens your time to the customer. So a lot of times throughout the Indo-PACOM, when we're looking at that, that's by using C-17s. So if we need to use C-17s, we're utilizing air, or we're using through channel flights. We can also utilize the Pulse W, which is our watercraft, bringing things inter-islands or throughout the island Pacific chains because it's already forward. And that we work with DLA and our AFSBs with that initiative as well. The other thing I wanted to highlight is another great opportunity that we have in Indo-PACOM is we just came out with the Forge, and that was just released. And that is an initiative that just came out, which basically is a facility at Schofield Barracks, which has 3D printing, machining, and rapid prototyping. So instead of waiting for that part, where you're sitting there waiting for it to come in through your supply system, that place, the Forge, can now make and prototype propellers, any type of part that you need within hours, and then push it out to you through a channel flight or any means possible. And that's for the Joint Force. So that capability was just introduced and so by Indo-PACOM. So the Indo-PACOM commander was there this past week. Yeah.
No, I think it's great, and it's kind of forced. I guess I'm not part of the Hawaii congressional delegation, but I've rethought what Hawaii is to the Joint Force when you think about what a non-permissive, pure war, degraded environment, a crazy WES that you have to consider in the opening days. I think it makes you reconsider what we're using Hawaii for with respect to the Joint Force. And is it more of a World War II coaling station type approach to it, but lop on a new way of thinking about it with respect to maybe the magazines in Hawaii need to be bigger. Maybe there's more additive manufacturing that's in Hawaii. It's a different way to kind of think about Hawaii that I think if you take into account what a adversary will or will not give you in the opening days, it's maybe forces us to reconsider. Chuck, you started talking about Fifth Fleet and the lessons we were learning there, which I appreciate. But what it also made me think about is you have a global demand problem. And while we still don't have enough ERTs, QRTs, OHE, reload teams of all varieties, how are you balancing that today to try, if you hedge towards the pacing problem, but you've got bosses in Fifth Fleet who tell us you have to have some stuff there. How are you approaching that problem right now?
Yeah, so my boss, Admiral Andros, has been very deliberate in kind of reducing our overall employment, right? So gift map requirements, so that we can retool the Navy Expeditionary Combat Forces. So over the last few years, they've gone to, prior it was large units with significant capacity, but they did a lot of things and it wasn't down to a unit level solution. So what they've done is retooled down to smaller teams, more junior folks leading different evolutions so that we can increase capacity and start getting after it. The challenge, of course, is going to be outfitting with your proper equipment and on scale to be able to go out and do. And then additionally, what we're looking at is all, like everything else, is a time distance problem in the Pacific. So doing a lot of analysis to get after pre-positioning of different equipment that we need. If you want to talk about cranes, right, 110-ton crane, what we need to be able to move stuff around, and whether or not that's a dual purpose, so we can do port repair or airfield repair or move ordnance. Right, so trying to look at what common equipment that we can use and do that distribution plan so that we can start buying down that time distance problem that was talked about with kind of setting the theater. But
yeah, I appreciate that, and I think there's an education part of it too, right? Part of the reason that we didn't reload an SM2 in Okinawa is because the NAVFAC CO didn't agree with my estimation of what the crane should be rated for, and so I think there's some policy and education things, whereas we get assets that are in country and then have appropriate commander levels perhaps taking a new approach to, well, this isn't the crane that the Navy bought, but it works. And so you need to buy the risk and you need to own it and you need to say that you can use it.
So, and for what we're doing deliberately within my organization right now is the Warfighting Development Center, is we're actually drafting up a CONOP for advanced naval bases, right? So trying to get from that improved base to where the forward edge to support Loki or EABO for the Marine Corps, trying to define what that intermediate base would look like, what the requirements are, what the Marine Corps is going to need, what the fleet's going to be able to use that for, and we're getting ready to start doing some TTXs to get after not only what we should be doing in the future, but what we can do tonight. So that's another effort that we'll be doing. We'll be doing some TTXs coming up this fall.
Well, that's awesome. I think we have time for a lightning round, and that'll be a good segue into some questions from the crowd. Brandon, segue is a fancy word for transition. So the Navy's using 6 R's when we kind of think about what logistics and mobility is. Refuel, rearm, supply, repair, revive, redistribution. Redistribution's a kind of a new term. You can take it or leave it. Don't really care. But those other 5 are pretty important. So as I go down the panel, name your number 1 risk area that concerns you the most. My vote is revive. I think that's where we're probably in the most jeopardy. We haven't had mass CASEVAC or mortuary affairs to deal with on a World War II scale. Nobody in uniform today, including the Commandant and the CNO, have ever faced this sort of scope of a problem. So I think that that's really going to eat our lunch. I think there's positive stuff happening, but I think we're still pretty nascent. Nimitz understood mobility in Ulithi Atoll. He had a ship that was dedicated to nothing but baking cakes and cookies. And so if you think about where we're not, and when you think about a revive pillar being so underthought, under-examined, under-resourced, we've got a lot of work to do. And so revive pillar for me is the number 1 risk area. Chuck.
My time in the fleet has been dated a bit, but I'm going to go with repair, and that is being able to keep the assets in the fight longer. I think we've become too reliant on intermediate and depot level repairs, and we've lost some of those skill sets within our formations to keep our stuff in the fight. And I think that'd be what we need to do, focus on.
Amen. Audrey, please use a Navy term to describe your biggest risk area.
Well, I would echo, and I would also say repair. However, I do believe that as we heard from Secretary Keller, that we need to continue to use those partnerships and continue to build those partnerships to basically have those capabilities forward. We need to build out shipyards, repair facilities forward in those areas to mitigate that time distance for shipyard repairs and repair facilities to build out that capability in the Indo-Pacific as well as forward in CENTCOM as well. Thank you.
John.
I was going to go with revive too, but just to make it different, I'll say rearm. When I say rearm, I'm going to just focus in on just the critical munitions like TLAMs and JASMs. The high-end munitions that are going to be ones that are, I call them exquisite, but they're the ones that command commanders really keep track of on a daily, if not weekly basis. Where are they at? How can I get more? They're always fighting over them. The point is that source of supply is finite. I wish it wasn't, but they're in competition with each other, trying to support each other's O plans or just get what they need for their O plan. And even if they were able to get those, it's a really bad news story about how long they can last in terms of what's the endurance of that fight. I think in most cases, well, I won't go into that here, but it's a very difficult story. So even with those munitions in place, they've got to figure out how to do the replenishment. You mentioned the reload teams, getting them in place, getting the munitions in place. A lot of time, the Navy's got a replenishment at sea challenge right now to get TLAMs reloaded into a vertical launch system. Again, they're looking at commercial options for that, but it's just a host of challenges that are surrounding this to get them rearmed, to get past D+6 just before they go Winchester. So it's a difficult problem set, and it's kind of both ends, both on industry base all the way to the military capability part.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks. All right, Tim, last word before we toss it to the crowd.
All right, so I'm taking the total different, which is good. So I guess I'll go with redistribution. I hadn't heard that one yet, Admiral, so I was aware of the other 5, but I'm gonna go with that's how we actually move around the theater once we get there as a logical guess. I think the challenge here is to do everything that we all say we need to do. You need a vast fleet of vessels of all different sizes, makes, models, autonomous, not autonomous, manned, unmanned teaming, whatever we want to use buzzwords today. So we successfully did this in World War II. Again, the book's on the table. We're not there right now, and at the end of the day, it's money, time, and then once I build here, time to get forward. If I additive manufacture forward, that's great, but I still have to get everything forward to additive manufacture. I still have to do engine work, electric, all those things. So maybe there's a part for parts and stuff or for repair. And then really, again, we know from history, it's uneconomical for the services to have that. So if you read how we started to demob, like literally the day after World War II ended, like bigger landing craft were going home to like sit in bays to get scrapped. Like that's where we were. And sailors were getting demobbed immediately. Like, so the problem set is massive. So that's why I'm gonna park on that one.
Roger that. Okay. I think we got about 15 minutes before the break. Hopefully that teed up some good questions. I'll go one right here with the gentleman, two, and then the Marine back there, and then sir in the sweater here.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for a great panel and great conversation. But I'm going to hang my hat on interoperability. What is the incentive structure that needs to change so that way our O2s, E4s, and E5s are interoperable and not our E9s and O6s? Because that's, I think, what we're talking about when we talk about the last 200 miles. It could go from one uniform to the next, to the next, to the next, to support any DoD partner out there doing the thing to accomplish those strategic initiatives. And I'm asking that because I think today it's only in a joint exercise. There's no METs, there's nothing kind of forcing us at the deck plate level to go find out what the Air Force is doing or the Army is doing. And, you know, I may be a sergeant, but the Army can do that for me, so I don't have to worry about that problem. So curious if that.
No, it's a great question. I begged for 2 years as a flag officer to get into a Air Force contested logistics war game, and I was unsuccessful. So, I think at the deck plate level is a really good conversation. So, Chuck, Audrey, Tim, thoughts?
I'll just offer up that on the Navy Expedition Combat Forces, we have 5 different tribes, and we don't operate together routinely, except for in my exercise series that I do, and that's relatively new and only at the headquarters level, right? And then when you look at some of the large scale exercise and other things, we're looking at mocks to mock and other things like that as we try to look at interoperability. But I do believe that there is growing awareness, at least in the stuff that we're doing, that we have to be able to work more with partners, allies, and such. And in fact, I'm asked for McWill to come over and give a brief to us on their futures so that I can start to integrate that more into our force design so we can start closing that gap. But I think the good news is that there's awareness, and I do believe that there's a little bit of effort to get after it, but it's going to be slower, and especially when we start talking about more domain fights versus geographic fights.
Sure. For me, I've seen it throughout my career, but it's service dependent. However, for me, I would always stress basically coming up with opportunity training at the lowest level, doing JLOTs, CJLOTs together, because it's that interoperability, doing harbor master training, opportunity training. I had to integrate the Army into RIMPAC, and that was the first introduction to the Army, and then basically demonstrating Army capability and putting helos, like doing medevac underway with other naval forces and basically doing modular causeways. But it's trying to have everyone on board to do that. So it's trying to get the commands energized to do that interoperability. And I think that's the most important thing, is having that joint in interoperability. Because if we can't do that as the US, it's really hard to do it with allies and partners. And for me, I've been working in NATO for the last 4 or 5 years, and it's important that we come as a united front.
Tim, how does the schoolhouse view the right combination? McWill is a schoolhouse, lack of a better term, but his point is a valid one, but what is the right mix for an O2 or E5 or E6? I mean, part of what I need an O2 to do is drive a destroyer according to the regulation and not so much think about the joint fight, but where's the right combination, Tim?
So I think we kind of hit it, Admiral, really at the tactical level. So I'm glad you're talking neck. I've been really confused on the neck for the last 3 years. I've been trying to read, find pubs, do that kind of academic pre-work. before asking questions, right? Because you kind of should do that, or if you don't, then your credibility is kind of not really good initially. So if we're not educating ourselves initially, and I would say that's at all echelons, but definitely on the officer and staff and CO side, to ask those questions back into the joint force partners, then we're not doing ourselves a favor, and we're not being able to ask the right question. And I'll dovetail that into when we were working on how to actually command and control a Marine Corps vessel. I had to read a lot of MSC stuff that I never thought I'd ever read. And then I had to go to MAR4Com in person multiple times to use MAR4Com as the service headquarters, to get police forces in the room, to then have a discussion about how we actually do this. But we did a lot of pre-reading to ensure that in that conversation, we were speaking in naval language, not just pure Marine Corps language.
Yeah, that's great. Marine, sorry, I apologize. I'm old. I can't see your rank. You had your hand up there. Gunny, the mic is inbound.
Good morning.
Good morning, Gunny.
The one question I want to ask, and I'll give some context behind it, is what can Marine Corps logisticians do for the joint force? So the context of that is in 2019 when General Berg came out with force design, he basically said, Marines, get up and pull your weight, right? Especially with the Navy. We ride the ships, we get there, we hop off, but that sail time of 4 months, 6 months, what are we doing to assist the Navy? And in the years I've had experience, and I was lucky to have this experience, is working with the Army, Air Force, Navy, even sometimes the Coast Guard. Everyone has their own TTPs, or policies and procedures, and how they do things. There is no joint doctrine that really states, Marine Corps logisticians, you must know the port opening procedures for the Joint Task Force. Or, hey, you have to understand how the Army does rapid response. Or with the Air Force working in PACOM, is trying to understand the language. We all talk logistics, but there's different contexts, different symbologies or terminologies that each branch uses. The biggest hard lesson I learned being a Marine, but also a Navy brat, is when you go to load a ship, the one person you don't want to make mad is the boatswain's mate. That's the one thing I learned working on.
Is that really true? I'm just kidding.
I was a prior bosun mate, I'd say yes.
So I think I'll take a whack at it, and then John, I'd be interested in your thoughts. So I think the way that I saw things happening was I need a Marine Corps C-130 crew to be comfortable loading a Air Force airfield damage repair kit and the associated personnel alongside it to go fix a hole in a remote airfield. So I think, so from my perspective, that's what we have to get comfortable with, and that goes through training and experimentation in a way that I don't think happens at the capacity today. So John?
Yeah,
I mean, get to you, sir, for one last one before lunch.
I think part of that, in my opinion, you get some of that exposure and experience in large-scale exercises where you see it firsthand how the other services are doing things. I mean, that's been my experience when I was in the military. And then there's other things that are very specific that I think I wish, in my opinion, the Marine Corps could go out and actually observe and watch. Is, you mentioned the F-35, for example. The PACAF, or the Air Force at large, has a concept called Agile Combat Employment. It's fascinating. I mean, it's really, I saw it used with a lot of success in CENTCOM. And Indio PACOM's got a very aggressive plan for a lot of different expeditionary, austere locations to set up some of their fighter squadrons. F-35 is one of them. How do you make that work? It is almost entirely built around a logistics system that has to be in place. Now, they've got a lot of capability to move fuel, KC-135s, and they got C-17s and C-5s, but it's so much air in the balloon. They're squeezing other combatant commands to get these airframes and supplies into those locations, and you can get firsthand see how the Air Force does this under a certain window. The Marines see this, and you'd be like, wow, that's incredible. And oh, by the way, we also use the F-35, certainly a different variant, but I mean, it's got really a lot of applicability and similarities of how we would do it as well. So I think my point of mentioning at DFE is that, hey, there's a lot of opportunity there for if you can get a chance to go out there, even as just an observer, you gain some knowledge in TTPs about how the services do it. And you'll see there's a lot more similarities. The language might be slightly different. And they might do some things a little different, but for more or less, it's usually been my experience, it's the same. It's just a little bit crinkles in it.
Yeah, and the challenge is those decisions today in a non-comms degraded environment are happening at a crazy level, 06, 07, 08 levels. So what happens in a comms degraded environment where that O2 or E5 or loadmaster is the one making the decision because he or she doesn't have any other guidance. So I think that's a training piece I think that we have to get to. So, sir.
If not, I cut.
No, it's coming right to you, sir.
Quick question, ma'am. So the forge,
Yes.
what's the manning requirements for something like that? Oftentimes, I'll read articles about additive manufacturing, and they show the hardware requirements.
Sure.
Well, I work over at the NECC, and we look at things like manning requirements. So it's probably an unfair question to a certain extent because it depends on the widget you're trying to develop. But I know the Marines are working down to the battalion level as far as fixing UAVs because I've read articles on that. So I'm trying to get a feel for how many personnel do you need to sustain something like the forge for operational purposes.
So it's a new initiative, and I don't have those exact numbers, but I do understand it to be joint. So all services are contributing to that headcount in order to have those capabilities, in order for them to be able to prototype those capabilities and push those forward throughout the Indo-PACOM theater. So I think those will probably be in fluctuation as it is a new capability, sir.
I'm getting a feel it's probably about a squad of 20 personnel, probably at a 2 level. Now, you're going to have your I know this is during the said. I know you have the transport requirements, but the really IT people who are working the system is going to be a select few very smart service personnel who are manufacturing the product along with the hardware.
Yes. And that can range from different things for different services. So it could be aviation parts, naval vessel parts. So.
Okay. In my world, early's on time's late. So we're at time 45. And thank you very much for listening and your attention. And hopefully we all learned a little something. Thanks.
You got me up here quick. I had my timer to walk up here as well. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That was a great panel. I want to pass a few things before you go to lunch. One, tonight or this after our conference today, we have the awards ceremony. Please stay for that. You're going to go to lunch. You're going to have great conversations. I know you have meetings and things to attend to and families, and there's obviously competing priorities. But please stay for the awards ceremonies this afternoon because they are important. We're going to recognize some service members, and it's important to be able to do that. And your presence is important. Also, come talk to somebody with one of these shirts today about joining AMCL and seeing how you can get involved. We should have been more deliberate about that. So at some point today, between lunch or after when we have the award ceremony, and there will be drinks after the award ceremony, if that's the thing that's going to keep you. I'm trying my best here. This is my best work, okay? I'm not a comedian. But talk to somebody about joining. Active duty service members, normally there's a reduced cost. I'm going to go flight attendant mode here and say, like, if you join when you're on this airplane, if you join AMCL while you're here at this conference, I'm going to get you a code to zero out the cost. So it's going to be zero for active duty service members if you want to, or those of you who are on active orders, right? So uniform wearers in the crowd. Josh is in the back. He's going to help you out with that. He hates me for that, but this is what I do. I run my mouth on a microphone. And then come talk to me, talk to Kirk, talk to Josh, talk to Greg. We appreciate it. This panel was fantastic. Admiral, team, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Round of applause for the panel.